Establishment of company power. India has been a popular destination for trade since ancient times. India had a flourishing trade with Europe, Africa, Middle East and Southeast Asia. There was a great demand in Europe for Indian spices, silk, textiles, muslin, indigo, precious stones, etc. This trade was particularly brisk during the first 3 centuries of Christian era. But the old trade routes through Egypt and Syria up to the Persian Gulf were closed in 7th century CE, when the Arabs conquered those countries. When Constantinople was occupied by Ottoman Turks in 1453, the land route was practically closed. As European nations had no ports on the shores of Mediterranean Sea, they were shut out from participation in the lucrative trade with the East. So, there arose the necessity of finding a non-Mediterranean sea route to India. The Portuguese. The Portuguese were the pioneers in finding a new alternative sea route to India. In 1498, Vasco da Gama, under the patronage of King Emmanuel, set out to India. He crossed the Cape of Good Hope and reached Calicut in India. Initially, the Portuguese controlled the trade route along the Malabar coast. Their position was consolidated by able generals like Almeida and Albuquerque, who established their trade settlements in Goa, Daman and Diu. The Dutch East India Company. In 1602, the Dutch founded the Dutch East India Company. As their main interest was trade, they concentrated their attention on the Spice Islands in the Far East. They established their trading centers at Surat, Bharuch, Nagapattinam, Cochin, Masulipattnam. In 1658, they won Ceylon from the Portuguese. After intermittent wars and agreements with British, they gave up all the claims to India and concentrated only on Indonesian islands. Trivia. The Spice Islands were a small group of islands to the northeast of Indonesia between Celebes and New Guinea. They were the largest producers of maize, nutmeg, cloves and pepper in the world. The English East India Company. On 31st December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted the East India Company the monopoly to trade with the Eastern world for 15 years through a charter. It was a private company organized by a group of English merchants. Captain Hawkins, the ambassador of King James I, got a decree from Mughal Emperor Jahangir to open a factory at Surat in 1609. But this concession was revoked under pressure from the Portuguese. When British defeated Portuguese in 1612 at Surat, Jahangir granted a farman to British, allowing them to establish a permanent factory at Surat in 1613. In 1615, English ambassador Sir Thomas Roe got the permission from the Mughal Emperor to open more factories at Agra, Ahmedabad and Bharuch. The company bought the site of Madras in 1639 and also obtained permission to set up a fortified factory called Fort St. George. In 1651, the company established factories at Hooghly. In 1661, the company got islands of Bombay from Charles II at a nominal rent, who got it from Portuguese as part of dowry of his wife. Further, in 1698, the company developed 3 villages into a city in Bengal and built the Fort William around the factory. The city came to be known as Calcutta. By this time, the company became successful in eliminating the influence of its rival powers in India and started to interfere in the political affairs. Trivia. Fort St. George currently houses the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly and other official buildings. Trivia. Between 1609 and 1698, East India Company established its factories almost all over India: Surat, Ahmedabad, Bharuch, Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. The French East India Company. The French were late in making their appearance on the Indian coast. In 1664, the French East India Company was founded and the French established themselves in Chandarnagar, Bengal, Mahe, Kerala and Karaikal and Pondicherry on the eastern coast and Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. The French East India Company was established by Colbert, who was a minister of Louis XIV. It was largely a government-controlled company which depended on the French government for finances. Pondicherry became its headquarters, and in 1742, French appointed Joseph-François Dupleix as the governor of its possessions in India. His ambition of establishing the French Empire in India led to the wars between the English and the French. Mercantilism. Mercantilism is the economic theory according to which the prosperity of a nation depends upon its supply of capital, and the global volume of trade is unchangeable. The amount of capital represented by gold held by the state is best increased through a positive balance of trade with other nations through large exports and low imports. It suggests that the ruling country, mother country, should advance these goals while playing a protectionist role in the economy by encouraging exports and discouraging imports through the use of tariffs. The foundation of British rule in India. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the English, and the French came to India as traders to make huge profits out of trade. Naturally, it led to a sense of competition, and as a result, they became rivals. The English were successful in driving out Portuguese and Dutch from most of the parts of India, but French were still in India up to the end of the 18th century. Both French and English were eager to establish their supremacy in India. In a bid for supremacy, wars often used to break out between these two countries. Their difference were finally resolved through the three Carnatic Wars or Anglo-French Wars fought from 1744 to 1763. They are called Carnatic Wars because most of the battles were fought in the Carnatic and other parts of the present-day Tamil Nadu. The French and the British were traditional rivals in Europe. Their interests also clashed in America. Wars between them in Europe spread to India, where both the companies wanted monopoly of trade. This meant that they had to settle their differences through wars or talks. They were too hostile to each other to negotiate settlements. Since India did not have strong central power at that time, they used the unstable conditions in Carnatic and Hyderabad to settle their differences. First Carnatic War. The First Carnatic War was fought from 1744 to 1748. The first struggle between the English and the French in India was an echo of the War of Austrian Succession which broke out in Europe in 1740. The threat to capture Pondicherry, a French settlement, by the English fleet led the French governor Dupleix to capture Madras, now Chennai, which was ultimately restored to the English by the treaty that ended the War of Succession. Trivia. The three villages that were developed into a city in Bengal and where Fort William was built were Gobindapur, Kalikata and Sutanuti. Trivia. 4 Carnatic Wars were fought between British and French on Indian soil. Second Carnatic War. This war was fought over the issue of succession in the Carnatic and Hyderabad. The French wanted to install Chanda Sahib as the Nawab of Carnatic, while English East India Company supported Muhammad Ali. Similarly, in Hyderabad, they supported the claims of two rival candidates. French supported Muzaffar Jung Nizam, while British favoured Nazir Jung. Each hoped that the Nawabs they installed would grant greater economic concessions. In this war, French were defeated. Muhammad Ali was made the Nawab of Carnatic. This war ended between 1748 to 1754. Later on, a peace treaty was signed between the two rival forces and Dupleix was called to France. That was perhaps the turning point in French's role in Indian history. Third Carnatic War. The Third Carnatic War was an extension of 7 years of war in Europe. The peace treaty proved to be temporary. Another war broke out in 1756. The British had gained control of the rich province of Bengal after the Battle of Plassey. The French were handicapped by the shortage of funds. They were defeated in the Battle of Wandiwash in 1760. Within a year, they lost all their possessions in Carnatic. After the Treaty of Paris in 1763 between France and England, the French company was given back its factories, but they were not allowed to keep troops. The French continued to trade under the protection of the British. The English also realized the weaknesses of Indian rulers and their armies. They were nobody to use these to their advantage in the coming years. The rise of the British power. Taking advantage of the confusion that prevailed after the death of Aurangzeb, one of the governors, Alivardi Khan of Bengal, asserted his independence. He was diplomatic enough to maintain good terms with the English, but at the same time did not allow them to fortify their settlement. He was succeeded by his grandson, Siraj-ud-Daulah, who was suspicious about the conspiracy of English. So, he came into conflict with them. Battle of Plassey. The battle was fought between the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, and the English East India Company in 1757. The English were adding to their fortifications without the Nawab's permission on the pretext of French attack. Siraj-ud-Daulah, suspicious of their intentions, ordered the English to dismantle their recent fortifications. As the English did not dismantle the fortification, Siraj-ud-Daulah seized the English factory at Kazim Bazar. It is said that 145 English prisoners were confined to a small town for the night and in the morning. It was found that only 23 had survived. This incident was known as Black Hole Tragedy. Consequently, war started on 23 June 1757 on the field of Plassey. Trivia. The 7 Years' War was fought between 1754 and 1763. It affected Europe, North America, Central America, the West African coast, India and the Philippines. The two major opponents were the Great Britain and France. Robert Clive led the company's army against Siraj-ud-Daulah at Plassey. One of the main reasons for the defeat of the Nawab was that his commander-in-chief, Mir Jafar, and a large portion of the Nawab's army under Mir Jafar did not assist Nawab in this battle. Clive had managed to secure Mir Jafar's support by promising to make him the Nawab after crushing Siraj-ud-Daulah. The Battle of Plassey became famous because it was the first major victory of the company in India. Siraj-ud-Daulah was captured and killed. Clive became the Governor-General in 1758. Though he exercised effective control over Mir Jafar, the British were unhappy with him and replaced him with Mir Qasim. The new Nawab rewarded the company with 3 more districts and presents worth 29 lakh rupees. Soon Mir Qasim emerged as a threat to the company. He shifted his capital to Mongir, improved the finances and the state of the army. What irked the British most was his bold step of abolishing taxes on internal trade for all. Now, Indian merchants were also able to enjoy concessions which only the British enjoyed so far. Battle of Buxar. This battle was fought in 1764 between Mir Qasim, the Nawab of Bengal, the Mughal Emperor and the Nawab of Awadh on one side and the English on the other. The Allies were defeated by the company's forces at Buxar. It was one of the decisive battles of Indian history as it made the company the real masters of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Mir Jafar was reinstated and after his death, his son rewarded the company with cash and territory. In 1765, both Shuja-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Awadh, and Shah Alam II, the Mughal Emperor, signed the Treaty of Allahabad with the English Viceroy, Lord Clive. Under this treaty, the company got the rights to collect Diwani revenue from the Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. The Nawab of Awadh paid 30 lakh rupees to the company to retain his Nawabship. Shah Alam II got the districts of Kora and Allahabad and was also given an annual pension of 26 lakh rupees. This treaty made the company the Diwan of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, which meant that the company directly collected its revenues. The company also had the right to nominate the Deputy Subedar. The post of Deputy Subedar was invested with the power to control the Nawab or the police and also had judicial powers. This resulted in the same person officiating as the Deputy Diwan on behalf of the company and as Deputy Subedar on behalf of the Nawab. This system of administration is known in the history as dual system of administration. This dual system resulted in Nawab being saddled with responsibility without power, whereas the company had the power without responsibility. As a consequence, the people of Bengal were neglected a lot, with neither the company nor the Nawab working for their welfare. Expansion of British Empire. After conquering the richest province of Bengal and having eliminated all their foreign rivals, the company was now ready to acquire more territories in India. By 1818, entire subcontinent except Punjab and Sindh had been brought under their control. Part of it was ruled directly by the company and the rest of the two princely states over whom the company had supreme control. Anglo-Mysore Wars. 4 Anglo-Mysore Wars were fought between 1766 to 1799. Led by Warren Hastings, the company fought 2 wars with the Nawab of Mysore, Hyder Ali. Though Hyder Ali had some victories, British were able to finally subdue him with the help of Nizam of Hyderabad and the neutrality of Marathas. Hyder's son Tipu, perceiving the British intentions, waged 2 wars against Governor-Generals Cornwallis and Wellesley. He was killed fighting heroically in 1799 at Seringamapatnam. His territories were divided between the British and their ally, the Nizam. The new ruler was forced to sign the subsidiary treaty. Anglo-Maratha Wars. The company fought 3 wars with Marathas to finally subjugate them. Unfortunately, the Maratha Sardars were not united and they took sides in the intense power struggle that was going on among the different factions around the Peshwa. Often some sided with the British to fight the other. The British were finally able to strike with great energy and vigour under Lord Hastings in 1818 and managed to dethrone the Peshwa and depose him off on pension. His territories were annexed to the province of Bombay. The Maratha chiefs Holkar, Scindia, Gaikwad and Bhosle signed the subsidiary treaty. Subsidiary treaty. Lord Wellesley gave shape to a policy that subordinated Indian states under the paramount authority of East India Company. The ruler who signed the subsidiary treaty accepted the permanent stationing of British forces in his kingdom at his cost. To meet its cost, an Indian state would either surrender a portion of its territory to the company or would pay an annual amount. In return, the company would protect all the subsidiary states against foreign invasion. The Indian rulers were expected not to fight or keep any contract with any other power without the permission of the British. The Nizam, the Nawab of Awadh, the Marathas and the Rajputs were the major rulers who signed this treaty. The British thus maintained a large army stationed all over India at the expense of the rulers. The ruler had to disband his army and he lost control over his defense, foreign and domestic policies. It led to the disruption of economy as lakhs of soldiers and court officials became unemployed. With the short protection from the British, the rulers neglected the welfare of the people and their rule became more oppressive. Expansion from 1818 to 1857. As stated earlier, by 1818, the entire subcontinent except Sindh and Punjab had been brought under British control. Sindh was a loyal subsidiary state and yet to be annexed in 1843 by an act of betrayal. The state of Punjab flourished under a large market for British goods. He was the Governor-General from 1848 to 1856, who devised a policy which came to be known as Doctrine of Lapse. The doctrine declared that if an Indian ruler died without a male heir, his kingdom would lapse or pass into British hands. Several states like Satara, Sambalpur, Udaipur, Nagpur and Jhansi were annexed under this policy. He also abolished the titles of rulers of Karnataka, Tanjore and Surat. He also refused to allow pension to ex-Peshwa Baji Rao, II's adopted son Nana Sahib. Finally, in 1856, the company also took over Awadh. The ruler accused the ruler Wajid Ali Shah of maladministration and misgovernance. The British declared that they were obliged by duty to take over Awadh in order to free the people from the misgovernment. Ranjit Singh, who had built a large kingdom, He had kept the British at bay through diplomacy and with the help of a strong army built on European line. But after his death, his kingdom plunged into instability caused by a civil war between his wife Rani Jindan and the army. Using this to their advantage, the British defeated the Punjab army in 2 wars and annexed Punjab. Thus, the last independent state was absorbed into the British Empire. Lord Dalhousie and the Doctrine of Lapse. Lord Dalhousie was determined to extend direct rule over a larger area as possible to facilitate. The British declared that they were obliged by duty to take over Awadh in order to free the people from the misgovernment of Nawab. Enraged by the humiliating way of which Nawab was deposed, the people of Awadh joined the great revolt that broke out in 1857. The revolt was successfully quashed by the British. With this, the conquest was completed. Many areas came directly under British administration. The Indian princely states were not directly ruled but were still part of British Empire as they were protected by it and they had no independent existence. Acts of Permanent Settlement. British policies were designed to increase the company's profit and to exploit Indian resources to their own advantage. However, it was felt that the British government should control the basic policies of the company's Indian administration, which had become highly corrupt. So, through a number of acts, the control of the British government over the company was established. The Regulating Act of 1773 was the first step in this direction. The Act subjected the actions of the directors of East India Company to the supervision of British government. The government in India was to be under the Governor-General and the Council of 4 members. However, the Act had certain limitations as no definite control over the company had been given to the British government and also the Governor-General could be overruled by his council. To improve upon this, Pitt's India Act was passed in 1784. It gave British government a supreme control over the company by establishing a new body, the Board of Control. It had 6 commissioners, including 2 cabinet ministers in the British government. It guided and controlled the work of Board of Directors of the company. The Governor-General, who lived in Calcutta, had a council comprising 3 members. The control of Governor-General over the presidencies of Madras and Bombay was clearly defined. Further, the Charter Act of 1786 gave the Governor-General the right to overrule his council. The Charter Act of 1813 abolished the company's monopoly of Indian trade. This meant that Indian trade was open to any British subject. By the Act of 1833, a law member was added to the Governor-General's Council. The company now became a purely administrative body. Administrative organization. Civil Services. Lord Cornwallis established the Indian Civil Services (ICS) in India. Prior to that, the traders assumed administrative functions. He tried to purify the administration by increasing the salaries and making promotions on the basis of seniority. After 1853, recruitment to the civil services started through an entrance examination held in England. As evident, it was extremely difficult for Indians to go to England and compete with British candidates. Later, the examination was held in India also. First Indian to pass the Indian Civil Service examinations was Satyendranath, brother of Rabindranath Tagore. Indians were excluded from higher posts in administration because the British did not trust them. However, a large number of Indians were employed in the subordinate posts. It was the highest paid service in the world, and civil servants were generally hard-working and efficient. Army. The army was important for the protection and extension of the British Empire in India. The company's army was first raised during Carnatic Wars. British maintained their hold over India with the help of Indian sepoys. The army consisted of British officers and Indian sepoys. The highest Indian officer could only be a subedar. The Indian sepoys remained loyal to their masters who paid them well. By 1815, there were 2 lakh soldiers in the army. The Indian army served the British well in the 2 world wars. Police. Lord Cornwallis established a regular police force in India to maintain law and order. Each district was divided into a number of thanas, each under a daroga, who had armed men under him to maintain peace. The district superintendent headed the police organization in a district. The villages were looked after by chowkidars and the towns by the kotwals. Judicial organization. The British codified the existing system of laws, which was traditionally based on Shastras in the case of Hindus and Sharia in the case of Muslims. In 1837, the Indian Penal Code and Codes of Civil and Criminal Procedures came into existence. A digest of Hindu and Muslim law was compiled to guide the judges. In 1774, the Supreme Court was established at Calcutta, now Kolkata, to try the servants of the company. They also introduced the rule of law and equality before law. Rule of law meant the administration could be carried on according to clearly defined laws rather than on the whims and fancies of a ruler. Equality before law meant that all human beings are equal before law without any discrimination. But in actual practice, Europeans had separate courts and they were tried only by European judges. Often, European judges let them off lightly. Justice became expensive and a lengthy process for ordinary people. The Governor-General was conferred all the law-making powers in 1833. Like in other services, Indians could not aspire to hold high posts in judicial administration. Conclusion. Thus, the East India Company was transformed from a trading company to a colonial power. The arrival of a new steam technology was helped in this process. The arrival of new steam technology also helped in this process. Steamships reduced the journey time, enabling more Britishers and their families to come to a far-off country like India. By 1857, the company came to exercise direct rule over about 63% of the territory and about 78% of the population of Indian subcontinent. Thus, East India Company had virtually the whole of India under its control.